am Richard Stanley. C'est moi, author, filmmaker, rogue anthropologist, paranormal journalist, and veteran of 1,000 psychic wars.
I want to invite you to a new world. To my world. A shadowland that exists one step away from what you take to be reality. A slide zone between fact and fiction. Fact and truth. A place where magic and miracles still hold currency. The other world lies sublime, out of space and out of time.
You are tuned to Tales from the Otherworld, and I am your host, Richard Stanley. Arthur C. Clarke once speculated that any sufficiently advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. What we take to be our reality is really only what we believe it to be. It's bound by our beliefs and what we take to be the iron-bound laws of the physical universe. Yet even as I speak, any number of highly educated and highly motivated people are working around the edges of Einstein's theory of relativity, trying to find out whether it's possible within our lifetimes to travel to other stars and other inhabitable Earth-like worlds. By some strange fluke of destiny, I have with me tonight, here in the heart of the Devil's Pentagram, one of the top theoretical physicists in present-day Russia, Kirill Zatrimaylov, who is currently working for DARPA on a warp drive, essentially on an effort to create a theoretical framework to enable the human race to seed out among the stars, and quite possibly within our own lifetimes.
Episode 4: Warp Drives, Wormholes and Beyond.
I'm Richard Stanley, and this is The Otherworld. I'm delighted to have as my guest here at Shadow Theatre headquarters in the Zone, Kirill Zatrimaylov, one of Russia's foremost theoretical physicists, certainly one of the finest theoretical physicists of his generation. And Kirill is working on a project that I believe may be key to our survival as a species.
Nice to meet you. So the topic of my scientific research is warp drives and wormholes.
Yeah, warp drives and wormholes, which is something that a great many folk out there probably think is the province of science fiction. But I think it is within our grasp, within the grasp of our generation or the generations coming after us.
I hope so. Well, the idea behind the warp drive is the following. The usual spaceships rely on some sort of energy, some sort of fuel to, and therefore the faster you want them to go, the more energy you need. This is one fundamental limitation that makes it impossible to go too far away from our home planet in any a reasonable time period. However, the point of warp drives is that they are a particular class of solutions of Einstein's general relativity, and the point is that a warp drive is like a bubble in space-time, sort of like a region in a sense where space-time is curved. And this bubble moves through space-time and if you put a spacecraft inside, then it can move at any speed, in principle including superluminal, because it's not moving through space-time, but with space-time. Space-time drags it along.
Yeah, you're literally creating a curvature in space-time, a bubble inside of space-time, so the craft itself is not traveling through space-time, so is largely exempt from the normal problems you have of, any speed, any hypothetical speed could be possible.
Exactly, but as people say, there is no such thing as free lunch, and in order to sustain such a bubble, you need a negative energy density. This is, in fact, there are. In fact, there are no substances we know that have negative energy density. The only physical situation that remotely has something like that is the Casimir plates. It's called the Casimir effect. If you put two conducting plates very, very close to each other, then inside them you would effectively have something resembling negative energy density. So the only physical situation in which something like negative energy density is remotely possible is the so-called Casimir effect. Namely, if you place together two conducting plates very, very close to each other, then between them you would effectively have something like negative energy density. Because the electromagnetic field has vacuum energy density that we do not perceive in any form in everyday life, but between two conducting plates, there would be boundary condition that would remove some of the modes of the electromagnetic field, and therefore the effective energy would be, and therefore the energy density, the vacuum energy density between them would be negative compared to the outside world. So so the guy we're working for, Harold White in the United States, he believes that he is a pioneer of warp drive technology, and he recently suggested that with a certain geometric shape of Casimir plates, one could create something closely resembling a warp bubble in a lab. So this is what he is looking into at the point. And as for my own direction of research, I've looked into warp drives in external gravitational fields. In one of my papers, I found out that if a warp bubble is in an external field of a black hole or just any gravitating mass, basically, then under certain circumstances, it would require less negative energy density to sustain. And in my second paper, I have looked into the connection between warp drives and wormholes. Wormholes are another exotic object in general relativity. It's like a tunnel of sorts that can connect to different universes or to parts of the same universe. It's a generalization somehow of the notion of the black hole. And it also requires negative energy density to sustain itself. And therefore it was natural to assume that warp drives and wormholes have something in common. Surprisingly, we found out that they don't.
Yeah, you're saying that, if you try to bring the warp drive and the wormhole technology together, you end up with a singularity.
Yeah, gravitational singularity. So if you're on a warp drive and you try to cross the wormhole throat, everything just blows up. So whenever you come across a wormhole, Be sure to park your warp drive outside. That's the.
Sound advice. So yeah, it's in the very early days. Do you think that something like warp drive technology could be achievable in, if not in our lifetimes, at least in the lifetime of the generation after us?
Well, if we're speaking about toy warp drives, the kind I mentioned before, the tiny warp bubbles in Casimir cavities, then I believe this is within reach of our own generation. If if it if the idea works out, then we could have it. We could have actual toy warp drives in the nearest future. But however, if you're speaking about realistic warp drives, that's a much more remote perspective, because the toy warp drives I'm speaking about are a sort of medium effect, so they exist between the two plates and they cannot go out. It's like in physics, it's a bit like the difference between particles and quasi-particles. Particles fly all around us, and quasi-particles exist in a particular material, and they cannot go out.
Yeah, I still don't know how long it might take for the human race to figure out a way of reaching the nearest planet capable of sustaining biological life.
Well, that's an interesting question. With warp drives, you also have another kind of problem. Even if you manage to create this sort of bubble, then it just goes through space and you have no direct control of it. So, I mean, you cannot just pull the brakes and stop. So you have to invent something to create a warp drive and to stop it. Then some speculate that they might burst when encountering a strong gravitational field. So, like in the gravitational field of a planet or a star, the bubbles might disappear, but it's very speculative at the point.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And yeah, do you think that it's likely that any other non-human species or non-human intelligence out there in the universe might have figured out a way of doing this in order for them to come here?
Yeah, well, they might have figured out, but I have doubts about them coming here, at least with this regularity with which they are reported, because honestly, I'm not sure. Honestly, with the intergalactic scales, that they would have so much interest in one particular planet. For me, I would say it doesn't quite look plausible. Regarding this, regarding the UFO sightings and stuff like that, we discussed an entirely different hypothesis that has to do with ultra-terrestrials. An idea suggested by the astrophysicist Jacques Vallée and John Keel.
Yeah, the notion that many UAPs and what the UFOs that are being reported with increasing regularity may not be from another star, but maybe from some other dimension or vibrational frequency of planet Earth, what John Keel described as complex forces that have always been an immediate and essential part of our environment.
Yes, for me this looks more realistic because in this way they are in a sense from the Earth, just from the other side of the Earth in some sense. Now back to the warp drives. So, do you have any other questions?
I'm just fascinated by if there's any potential application, if the reasons that DARPA, for instance, would be interested in developing the warp drive, the direction they are going with it.
Well, that's difficult to say at the moment, but I would say the question of negative energy density is very interesting by itself because in general relativity, in classical physics and in quantum physics, what we observe is always a difference between energy states. So we can renormalize the energy zero level as we like, and there is no observable difference. But if we're in general relativity, this is not the case. You add some sort of vacuum energy and you immediately have a gravitational effect. So because in general relativity energy, mass and energy is what curves space-time. So you add some 0 point energy, some vacuum energy, and immediately you no longer have flat space-time. And the question of Casimir plates is interesting also from this perspective, because again the energy between them is negative from a relative point of view. So and therefore it would be interesting to see whether this sort of relatively negative energy can sustain any kinds of structures like that. The professor I'm working with at the University of Bergamo, Professor Remo Garattini, he put forward another proposal that Planck scale wormholes can exist between Casimir plates. And this would also be very intriguing to look into for the same reasons.
And these wormholes only exist for very short periods of time, for a few nanoseconds, right? They open and close very fast.
Well, it depends on the specific configuration of so in theory it could be a more or less stable wormhole could be possible. In practice not that much. Also with wormholes you have another kind of problem, that a wormhole connects to remote parts of space-time, and then you see when you create something, it depends on the energy density configuration in that particular part of space-time. But then so you you take negative energy density, you stack it together, you create a wormhole, but then it has to lead somewhere, and at that point somewhere you so So basically, you have a causal connection between this point in space-time and that point in space-time, and that's a problem. So how would this point in space, like you put negative energy density here, you put it there, but how would they know that they have to connect to each other? That's a problem. And if you put it here, there, and in the third place, then where would you have the wormholes leading to? How would they connect with each other? So you have some sort of uh, mm, mm, some sort of freedom there, which is not good, because theory should be telling you what exactly would happen. And and there, so basically, you have you can create mouths of wormholes in principle, but how would they connect to each other? The theory doesn't tell you that.
Oh wait, so we're still a ways from having a stable open wormhole.
I would say very far away. I personally believe that warp drives, I mean, like this kind of warp bubbles, I think there is more chance with it, because, with the warp drive you don't have this sort of problem. You have another kind of problem that has to do with direction, because the distribution of negative energy density, it has a toroidal form, and it's symmetric in the direction of motion. So whether a warp drive is moving this way or whether it's moving that way, it's the energy density distribution would be the same. But at least if we manage to create something resembling the energy density distribution in warp bubble between Casimir plates, then at least we would have something, and we would study how this object would behave.
That's definitely a step in a very intriguing direction. I mean, it sounds preferable to the notion of a wormhole, when of course you never know where the wormhole is leading or connecting to. And with the warp drive, the problem is, first of all, directing the drive as you say, in a circular force, a spherical force, how to get it to go in one direction, but then also how to stop, how to hit the brakes at the other end.
Exactly. John Keel and Jacques Vallée, they speculated that they based their speculation on the similarity of UFO sighting reports to the folklore stories of people encountering fairies, demons, and other such creatures. And so they thought that maybe it was the same phenomenon after all. It's like the pillow contact theory in reverse. In that theory, people believe that these tales from the folklore actually come from people encountering extraterrestrials. And Keel and Vallée, they think that in fact there may be a sort of supernatural creatures who are now cosplaying as aliens, who so they're somehow or they change their appearance depending on people's beliefs about them, and so nowadays they could pretend to be aliens, because just like about a century ago, when Zeppelins were the trend, there were reports, similar reports about fantastic kinds of Zeppelins, and about strange people who came from them. And now we have in the era of cosmic sci-fi, we have the we have reports of UFOs.
Yeah, the phenomena of the phantom airship, familiar from Jules Verne, from stories like Robert the Conqueror or Master of the World. These phantom zeppelins that haunted the world before the coming of space age, before heavier than air travel became possible, at which point the phenomena upgraded itself and suddenly became a flying saucer or technological craft. But these phantom airships that existed before the technological craft were very much a reality. I mean, my father saw one.
Wow!
Yeah, when he was a young man in the mountains in the Northern Cape in South Africa, my father Leonard claimed to have seen a phantom airship. This was back in the days long before World War II, and he was a very practical man. He was actually the local tax man and spent most of his life doing accountancy. He did not have a very big imagination, and this was the only real supernatural or paranormal event that my father ever talked about. And his description was consistent. He told the story many times over the course of time that I was around, describing this silver envelope of the Zeppelin that was low enough down that you could see that there were people in the gondola, that there were human beings or people riding in it, which is something commonly reported from the different folk who cited these things.
Well, who knows? In the Soviet Union, I believe these kinds of these kind of experiments existed as well, but they were even more classified in a way because of the official position of materialism. So the Soviet Union denied that something supernatural could exist, which is why, they had to be even more. When they did bring up something like this, they always referred to it in terms of so this is this is not supernatural, this is natural, we just don't understand yet how it works, but we will, and then we will use it to build communism. So that was their official mindset in the late Soviet Union.
Yeah, more the realms of the preternatural or the basis for new sciences. And to be fair on the former Soviet Union, Philip K. Dick's ideas were almost certainly the product of his own paranoia and of the process that he was going through in trying to understand what was happening. At one point, he thought Russian telepaths were targeting him, beaming him images from the Hermitage collection, which they were using as target images. And he, in fact, even wrote to the FBI complaining about this. But I suspect it was part of the paranoid spin that he was in, and I'm not convinced that that Soviet telepaths really were targeting Philip K. Dick.
Me neither. Given that he had basically he had a kind of a drug-induced psychosis. He wrote that novel called Scanner Darkly about an agent developing a split personality as a result of taking drugs. I do not doubt that he based it at least partly on his own experiences. So I would say I would take these sorts of claims regarding him with a grain of salt. So because you don't know for sure about supernatural in this case, because perhaps to perceive supernatural, you have to have an altered state of consciousness in some way. But when it comes to the conspiracy part, I'm somewhat skeptical, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, as one has to be, I think, and as one rightly should be. But I also think that prolonged exposure to, say, the work of H.P. Lovecraft or Philip K. Dick can induce a kind of contact high, where even without any form of drug enhancement or any kind of chemical stimulation, I think if one spends an entire week or 2 weeks reading Lovecraft or Philip K. Dick, it will have a palpable effect on one's paradigm and on one's day-to-day life. I think that it does affect the reality we're in.
Yes, and also spiritual practices. I would say the chemical way is just the easy way. So it's an easy way to have an altered state of consciousness. But in fact, in history, adepts sought to achieve this very state through different means, through prayers, meditation, and other kinds of spiritual experiences, spiritual practices. So which are not quick, which are not easy, but which at least they believe to be more solid than what one can achieve using substances.
Yeah, and they're definitely more comfortable ways to spiritual enlightenment than binge reading H.P. Lovecraft and Philip K. Dick. But it's still my contention that these things do have an impact on one's reality. I mean, coming back to Dick and the issue of genuine insight into the nature of consciousness versus drug-induced paranoia. Dick claims to have been receiving messages in the songs playing on the radio in his bedroom. And there's a celebrated incident where he becomes increasingly enraged after the song "You're So Vain" keeps playing on the radio, and to the point that he smashes the radio. And Tessa Dick, his widow, backs up the story that the radio continued to play and the song kept going even after Dick had apparently smashed the radio, that he couldn't actually stop the thing from playing, and he kept playing You're So Vain anyway.
This depends on whether Tessa heard it as well.
Yeah, I believe she did.
Wow.
Then I can take that one step further, which is when I was living in London, I had a flatmate, Angus Forbes, who was a respected stills photographer from many movie productions. He'd been on the production of Performance, the Nicholas Roeg, Donald Cammell movie. And Angus had lived with me a bunch of years and had never read a Philip K. Dick book. And in the last 24 hours, when I moved out from Portobello Road, he finally picked up one of the paperbacks and thought, okay, now it's time to sit down and read Scanner Darkly. So while I was moving out, Angus sat upstairs and he read Scanner Darkly. And just as I was leaving, he came down and he gave me back the paperback and he shook his head and said, I don't know, Richard, I really don't know about this Dick guy. I read the book, but I had the most terrible dreams afterwards. I kept dreaming that Julie Andrews was singing You're So Vain right to my face, and I really couldn't sleep. Gave me back the book. And he didn't know this Tessa Dick story or the story about Dick and the radio. It's what we would politely call a coincidence.
Wow. Well, the story about songs playing on the radio, that sounds in fact quite similar to symptoms of schizophrenia, but what you're telling adds an entirely different layer to all this.
Yeah, it's very upsetting. I don't know how much we want to speculate on the
the deeper underlying notion that what we take to be reality may be itself a simulation or something not much more complex than a sandbox video game.
Yes, in fact, in physics we have a concept that is often blended together with the idea of reality as a simulation. It's called it from qubit. So the idea is that the geometry of space-time is on some level created from the entanglement of quantum bits of information. So it comes from a concept originally created within string theory. It's called the ADS-CFT correspondence. It postulates that the theory that the physics inside the bulk of a volume in some specific models could be as well described by the physics on the boundary. So the bulk is the bulk physics are completely described by the boundary physics. But this applies to the so-called anti-de Sitter universe, which has a negative cosmological constant, so it has a kind of boundary. Our universe is the so-called de Sitter universe, which is expanding. It has no boundary, and so they do not directly translate to each other. But still, this correspondence inspired a broader family of ideas about that the geometry of space-time inside the bulk could emerge from the entanglement of qubits that exist in some way on the boundary in lesser dimensional space. So some people, including some of the researchers in the field, they do actually see some sort of link between the simulation theory and this.
Yeah, and I guess anything that has non-linear access to the program or the simulation would be perceived by us as something similar to these ultra-dimensional interferences in the otherwise normal smooth running of our lives. If we're living inside a program or inside a game, it makes sense that something exists outside of the game.
Exactly. One of the physicists who brought forward this interpretation of the it from qubit and stuff like that, his name is Xiao Gan Wen, and he indeed he published papers on the topic, and indeed he took it as evidence that we might be living in a simulation.
Yeah, no, all pure speculation. I know Elon Musk believes it, and it seems to work for him.
Yes, but Elon Musk is not a physicist.
Yeah, and I believe before you started work on this the warp drive project, you were in fact working on something akin to Neuralink, but a hardware-based Neuralink.
Yes, it's called neuromorphic computer. So I was working with a US-based startup called Artificial Neural Computing, started by the professor Vitaly Vanchurin, and the idea is to create so a neuromorphic computer is like a neural network, but a neural network is software written on an ordinary computer, and this is a neural network in hardware. So the idea is that atoms, the properties of materials, of atoms and electrons, that the materials themselves could learn like a neural network. So they could record new information, and they could, for the same input, they would produce a different output depending on what they memorized before.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
So, thank you and stay tuned. We're in for more discoveries in the coming years. I believe we're witnessing a shift of scientific paradigm, similar to the one that we had at the beginning of the 20th century with the discovery of relativity and quantum mechanics.
Yeah, we live in strange and interesting days indeed, and there is more to come.
This concludes episode 4, Warp Drives, Wormholes and Beyond.
You have been tuned to Tales from the Otherworld, coming at you from the heart of the Devil's Pentagram. This is your host, Richard Stanley, wishing you all a very pleasant journey home.
Richard Stanley's Tales from the Otherworld is produced by Nerd Horror Media in Los Angeles, California. Horror.